If the machines start drifting by 0.5%, you won't notice. Not at first. Not until 3 patients drop at once. Emily Carter said it quietly. No one at the nurses' station looked up. It was 7:03 p.m., the start of a rushed night shift handoff. Monitors hummed steady. The ICU looked calm. Dr. Jason Reed skimmed charts like he was already behind. The day nurse mentioned a few odd readings, then moved on. To everyone else, it sounded like routine noise. To Emily, it sounded like missing information. And missing information was never silence. It was noise in the wrong place. As the unit settled into the slower rhythm of the night, Emily moved bed to bed with a tablet in hand. She was not only checking vitals. She was opening system logs. Not summaries. Not the clean dashboard most people trusted. The actual timestamps underneath. That was where she saw the first inconsistency. One ventilator adjusted pressure 0.2 psi higher than ordered every 47 minutes. Then it reset itself. Like it was correcting a mistake no one had recorded. Emily did not announce it. She stepped in, corrected the setting, saved the change, watched the waveform smooth out in seconds. The patient's numbers stabilized just enough to look normal. Normal was the problem. Because normal in that room only meant no one was looking closely enough yet. From across the room, Olivia Brooks glanced over and said, "Looks fine to me." Emily nodded once. Because it did look fine if you only looked at the surface. But she had already opened 2 more machines. And the same pattern was there. Different labels. Same behavior. Slight offsets. Auto-adjust flags that should not have been active. Edits in the logs without user IDs. Tiny adjustments that were technically acceptable, but wrong in sequence. She traced them backward. All 3 had started during the previous day shift. All 3 clustered around the same update window. That was when Emily walked over to Dr. Reed. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through labs without really seeing the room around him. "There's a system drift across multiple ventilators," she said. "Small but consistent. It's adjusting outside the ordered parameters." Reed barely looked up. "If it's within tolerance, it's not the priority right now." Emily held his gaze long enough to make sure he understood she was not guessing. "It won't stay within tolerance." But he had already turned back to his screen. Conversation over. Dismissed before it even registered. Around them, the unit remained calm. Monitors steady. Staff moving on routine. Nothing dramatic enough to force attention. So Emily went back to the machines. Not arguing. Not escalating. Not trying to win the room. Just opening another log. Marking another timestamp. Building a pattern no one else had time to see. Because she understood something the room did not. The system was not failing randomly. It was drifting on purpose. And it had not reached the point where anyone else would notice. Not yet. By 9:18 p.m., Emily had stopped thinking in individual machines. Now she was thinking in sequences. One anomaly could be dismissed. 4 with the same timing could not. She lined up timestamps across 3 ventilators and saw it clearly. Each drift began exactly 12 minutes after a silent background sync. Not an alarm. Not a visible update. Just a brief entry buried in the back-end log. The kind of entry most staff would never open. She traced it deeper. Layer after layer of system activity. Until she found a configuration flag toggled during the day shift. A calibration profile. Something meant for testing. Not live patients. And it had never been turned off. That changed everything. Because every ventilator still connected to that network was slowly correcting itself toward a target that no longer applied. The correction was small enough to look safe. Until it stacked. Emily checked another room. Then another. Same flag. Same pattern. Same drift moving quietly under the surface. This time she did not go back to the desk. She went straight to the supply cabinet, pulled out a portable console, and connected directly to one ventilator to bypass the surface interface. Her fingers moved with practiced precision. Not reckless. Not improvised. Precise. She accessed deeper settings that most nurses never touched. Not because they could not. Because they were told not to. Olivia noticed and stepped closer. Are you even allowed to do that? Emily did not look up. Allowed does not fix this. Within seconds, she disabled the flag on that machine. Saved the configuration. Watched the pressure curve stabilize without the subtle oscillation it had before. Then she moved to the next bed. And the next. One machine at a time. Building consistency one correction at a time. The station. Dr. Reed was still explaining a lab result to a resident. Still unaware that the system he trusted was shifting under his supervision. When Emily returned briefly to document what she had changed, she wrote everything in clear, structured language. Timestamps, device IDs, exact parameter corrections. Not for credit, for the record, because if this escalated, the only thing that would matter was sequence. Reed glanced at her entry, frowned. You're over-documenting something that is not clinically significant. Emily met his eyes. Calm. Controlled. It will be. Then she turned away, because she did not need agreement yet. She needed time. That was when the tone changed. Not a patient alarm. Not a ventilator beep. A network tone. Different. Subtle. Wrong. Emily stopped walking. That sound meant the system was no longer drifting quietly. It was syncing again. And this time it was about to apply the wrong settings everywhere at once. The second the tone shifted, Emily turned back to the nearest terminal. The back-end queue was already forming. Multiple devices flagged for synchronization. Each one about to inherit the same incorrect configuration that had been quietly building all night. She moved fast. Not rushed. Fast in the way people move when they already know the sequence. Disconnect. Confirm. Override. Save. Repeat. She isolated one ventilator before the sync completed. Then another. Across the room, a monitor changed tone. Olivia looked up. That's not normal. Emily did not look back. It's not random either. Within seconds, another alert followed. Then another. Not failures yet. Warnings. Warnings stacking in a pattern that only made sense if you understood the system underneath them. That was when Dr. Reed finally stepped away from the desk. He scanned the room. What is going on? No one answered him clearly, because the screens still looked mostly stable. Numbers still technically acceptable. Nothing obvious enough to trigger protocol. Except the timing. The timing was tightening. Emily spoke once, calm and direct. The network is pushing a configuration that should not be active. Reed frowned, already halfway into dismissing it. Then cancel the update. Emily shook her head slightly, still working. It's not an update. It's a stored state being reapplied. That difference mattered. Because canceling an update would not stop this. Only isolating each device would. And she was already behind the sequence. Another ventilator accepted incoming parameters before she could block it. Pressure curve shifted subtly. Not enough to trigger full alarms. Enough to confirm acceleration. Now the room was changing. Not chaos. Tension. The kind that pulls attention before anyone can explain why. Nurses moved closer to monitors. Residents checked readings twice. Dr. Reed stepped toward the central console, trying to access controls that still did not show what Emily was already reading in the deeper logs. And for the first time, he paused. Only a fraction. But it was there. Because the surface data did not match the behavior. Emily used that pause the way she used everything else. Not to argue. To move faster. Bed to bed. Isolate. Correct. Document. Each action prevented the problem from getting worse. Each action also built the trail that would later explain everything. Olivia stopped questioning and started following. She watched Emily's sequence once, then repeated it on the next machine under her direction. And the pattern became undeniable. Every device that stayed connected drifted. Every device Emily touched stabilized. Now even Reed could see it. He did not say it yet. He did not have to. The difference was visible in real time. The system that had seemed reliable an hour earlier was revealing what it really was. Not a sudden failure. A controlled mistake spreading across every machine at once. By 9:42 p.m., the room had stopped pretending everything was normal. Not because the alarms were deafening. Because the pattern could no longer be ignored. Emily could feel the shift in attention without anyone naming it. At the start of the shift, eyes had passed over her. Now they followed her. She reached another ventilator just seconds before the next synchronization attempt. Isolated it mid-process. Watched the incoming configuration stall. Then disappear. Behind her, Dr. Reed was no longer issuing instructions. He was asking questions. Sharp at first, then precise. Which parameter is changing? Emily answered while working. Pressure support and auto-adjust flags. Both tied to a test profile that should not be active. This time he did not dismiss it. He stepped closer. Looked for the first time at the deeper interface she had been using all night. And what he saw did not match what he expected. The values were technically within acceptable ranges. But they were wrong in sequence. Drifting together in a way no single patient condition could explain. Then another machine across the unit accepted the sync before anyone could reach it. Its waveform tightened slightly. Oxygen held, but trended in the wrong direction. Subtle enough to survive a glance. Not subtle enough anymore to survive attention. Olivia called out, "Firm now." That one just changed on its own. Reed turned, and finally saw cause and effect unfolding in real time. The difference between the machines Emily had touched and the ones she had not. For one moment, the hierarchy in the room paused. Not officially, not out loud, functionally. Because the only person operating with a complete picture was the one who had been ignored at the start of the shift. Emily did not acknowledge that shift. She moved faster. "Disconnect network first," she told Olivia. "Then access advanced settings. Disable the flag labeled calibration override. Confirm before saving." Olivia followed exactly. Hands steady. Machine after machine. Reed moved to the central console again. Not to override Emily now. To understand the source. He scanned higher-level system logs and finally found the same pattern she had seen over an hour earlier. Clustered timestamps. Shared origin during the day shift update window. His expression changed. Not dramatic. Precise. Recognition replacing assumption. "This was pushed earlier," he said quietly. Emily did not look up. It wasn't cleared. That was the difference that mattered. Nothing had technically failed. The system was doing exactly what it had been told to do, just under the wrong conditions. And now those consequences were unfolding in a widening, controlled sequence. Reed straightened and turned back to the room with a different tone. No longer dismissive. No longer certain. Do exactly what she is doing. It was the first time he aligned the team behind her method. Not because she had rank. Because the evidence had become undeniable. Each corrected machine stabilized. Each untouched one drifted. As the team spread out and followed the sequence Emily had already built, the unit began to shift back toward control. Not fully stable, but no longer sliding in the wrong direction. And in the background, the system logs kept recording everything. Every change. Every timestamp. Every decision. A record that would later explain not just what happened, but who saw it first, and who understood it in time. By 10:06 p.m., the unit was no longer reacting. It was following a system, and that system belonged to Emily even if no one said it out loud. Every stabilized monitor traced back to the sequence she had built under pressure. Every unresolved machine still showed the same quiet drift. The gap between assumption and proof was closing. Emily moved through the last row of beds with the same controlled pace she had kept all night. She did not speed up just because others had joined in. Rushing would break the sequence. And now she could feel the timing. The intervals between network pushes were shortening. That meant the source was still active. They were fixing symptoms. But the system was still trying to reapply the configuration behind them. That was when Emily stopped at the central console. Not to take over. To verify the route. She opened the deeper audit layer Reed had only just begun to access. And together they finally saw it clearly. A batch configuration applied during the day shift. Tagged as a temporary calibration profile. Set to persist across all connected devices until manually cleared. and it had never been cleared, meaning every correction they made on the floor would eventually be overwritten unless the source itself was removed. Reed said it first this time, quieter, more precise. "We are fixing symptoms." Emily nodded once. "We need to remove the profile at the root." She did not wait for approval. She navigated through the system hierarchy the same way she had tracked the night from the start. Not guessing, following timestamps, aligning device logs with network events, until she found the control point where the flag had been set. It was not hidden. That was what made it dangerous. It was simply overlooked, labeled in a way that assumed someone would turn it off before it mattered. Emily paused just long enough to confirm scope. All ventilators in the unit. Then she disabled the calibration profile entirely, saved the change, and watched the pending synchronization queue clear in real time. One entry, then the next, until the system stopped trying to push the incorrect settings at all. The difference was immediate, but not dramatic. No sudden silence. No cinematic collapse into stillness. Just the absence of new drift. Monitors holding steady instead of shifting. Machines staying where they had been set. For the first time since the alerts began, the unit felt stable for the right reason. Not because it looked normal, because it was. Olivia let out a breath. She had not realized she was holding. When she looked at Emily now, there was no doubt left in it. Only understanding. Reed remained at the console, scrolling through the audit log now that it finally made sense. The original configuration from the day shift. The missing shutdown action, the cascading drift, then Emily's corrections. Exact, consistent, timed ahead of every visible symptom. A clean line from cause to response. He said nothing. He did not need to. The system had already said it for him. Emily stepped back from the console and returned to the floor. Not waiting for acknowledgement, just verifying each machine one more time. Her movements were exactly what they had been at the start of the shift. Calm, methodical, as if nothing about the hierarchy in the room had changed, even though everything had. By 10:31 p.m., the unit had settled into a steady rhythm again. But Emily did not treat stability as proof. She treated it as a checkpoint. She moved from bed to bed one more time. Not to fix, to confirm. No quiet drift returning. No delayed sync attempts. No hidden adjustment waiting to restart the problem. Each machine held where it should. Only then did she return to the nurse's station and begin documenting the full sequence. Not rushed. Not simplified. Precise. From the first anomaly at handoff to the final removal of the calibration profile. Every device ID. Every parameter change. Every timestamp that connected cause to effect. Because she understood something else the room was only just learning. By morning, what happened tonight would either be understood clearly, or dismissed as a vague technical issue. Only one of those outcomes would stop it from happening again. Across from her, Dr. Reed remained at the console, no longer scanning logs. Reading them, carefully, following the same trail Emily had already mapped. And the more he read, the less room there was for reinterpretation. The configuration applied during the day shift, the missing closing action, the gradual drift across devices, the corrections always ahead of the visible symptoms. After a moment he stood and walked over. He stopped beside her and waited until she finished typing a line. "When did you first see it?" Emily did not look up. "At handoff. The logs didn't match the summary." He processed that, then asked, "And you were sure it would escalate?" This time, she looked at him briefly. It was already escalating. Just slowly. He exhaled once. The kind of pause that comes when a conclusion settles without argument. Around them, the rest of the staff had returned to routine tasks. But the tone was different now. Less assumption. More attention. Olivia was double-checking logs on her own. Residents were looking at timestamps, not only dashboards. Reed looked from the console to Emily's notes and made the only decision left that still mattered. "We are submitting this as a system incident, with your documentation as the primary sequence." Emily nodded. That was the correct next step. Not praise, Not apology. Accuracy. She signed her entry with the exact time and closed the record. Quietly. Precisely. The same way she had started the shift. Just after midnight, the unit felt quieter than it should have. Not because less was happening. Because everyone was paying attention in a different way. Emily noticed it immediately as she resumed her rounds. Monitors steady. Logs clean. No hidden drift returning. But the real change was not in the machines anymore. It was in how people looked at them. Olivia paused longer at each screen now. Not just reading numbers. Verifying the data underneath. Even the residents were checking timestamps instead of relying on summaries. Small changes, but important ones. Because they meant the system had not only been corrected. It had been understood. At the nurses' station, the incident report moved beyond their floor and was flagged for review by the hospital's technical oversight team. A full audit extraction request appeared on the console. Not an alarm. A follow-through. Someone outside the unit was now following the same trail Emily had documented. Dr. Reed stood beside the terminal as the system compiled the timeline. No longer in a hurry. No longer assuming. When the file finished processing, he opened it without speaking. And for the first time, the entire night existed on one screen as a sequence no one could reinterpret. The original day shift configuration. The absence of a shutdown command. The gradual drift. The interventions. Each correction under Emily's credentials. Each timestamp preceding visible symptoms. He stopped at the earliest entry. You saw it before it showed up anywhere else. Emily adjusted a nearby setting and answered with the same tone she had used all night. The logs showed it. That line stayed in the air. Because it made the truth unavoidable. This was never intuition. Never luck. It was someone reading the system before the consequences became obvious. Reed closed the report slowly, then turned to the team. From now on, we review logs at handoff, not just summaries. No one resisted. Not because of his authority. Because they had all seen what happened when that layer was ignored. Olivia nodded as if the change had already become routine. Emily moved to the last room on her list, checked one final ventilator, and confirmed the settings matched exactly what they should be. No deviation. No correction needed. Across the unit, the same consistency held. Not because the system had fixed itself. Because someone had read it correctly at the right time. At 3:57 a.m., the hospital no longer felt like it was running on assumption. Felt measured. That difference showed up in small ways. Handoff notes became longer. Not because more had happened. Because more was being recorded correctly. Emily stood at the nurses' station finishing the final entries for her shift. Reviewing each line once more to make sure the sequence could be followed without explanation. Because clarity mattered more than credit. Across from her, the early morning team began to arrive. Usual urgency. Usual routine. But the transition began differently now. Logs were opened before summaries were trusted. Screens were checked beyond the surface. One incoming nurse glanced at the ventilator dashboard and said, "Everything looks stable." Olivia answered without hesitation. "Check the log layer too." A small sentence. But one that would not have been said a few hours earlier. And that was how systems changed. Not always with speeches. Sometimes with one new default. Dr. Reed stepped forward during handoff. Not to dominate it in his usual pace. To slow it down enough to include what had been missing. "We are reviewing system logs alongside vitals from now on." No one argued. The reason no longer needed defending. Emily handed over her notes and walked the incoming team through the sequence exactly as it had happened. The mismatch at handoff. The pattern across devices. The ignored calibration profile. The corrective steps. Every point tied to timestamps that matched the system record. No emphasis needed. The structure carried itself. When she finished, Reed added only one line. "Her documentation aligns with the audit report." That was enough. It connected her account. To system proof without exaggeration. As handoff concluded, Emily stepped back. Not waiting for acknowledgement. Just observing long enough to see the new shift begin inside a different structure than the one she inherited. Deeper layers checked before assumptions were made. Monitors remained steady, not because nothing could go wrong, because the people watching them were finally seeing more. Reed stayed at the station a moment longer, looking at Emily's structured notes, then at the console where the audit file had already been flagged for administrative review. He made one more change. Small, quiet, permanent. He added a required field for log verification to the handoff template. A single control that would outlast the shift. Emily noticed it as she gathered her things. She did not react. She only registered it for what it was. A system aligning with reality. As she walked past the row of ventilators one last time, each one held exactly where it should. No drift. No hidden adjustment. No silent correction waiting underneath. At the first machine she had corrected hours earlier, she paused and glanced once more at the log. No new entries beyond her own. Then she turned toward the exit as the day shift fully took over, leaving behind a unit that looked almost exactly the same as it had at the start of the night, but no longer operated on the same assumptions. At 7:58 a.m., just before the full-day shift settled in, the system review came back faster than expected. Not as conversation, as structure, attached directly to the incident report. Dr. Reed opened it at the central console while the room moved around him. The summary aligned line by line with the sequence Emily had documented. Calibration profile applied during a routine daytime test. Not cleared. First corrective actions taken within minutes of the night shift handoff. All of it confirmed. He scrolled further past the technical breakdown into response timing. Every intervention listed with exact timestamps. Emily's name appeared again and again at the beginning of the sequence. Not highlighted, not emphasized, recorded as fact. And that was where the hierarchy shifted in the only way that mattered. Inside the system that tracked what actually happened. Reed closed the report slowly, opened the handoff template he had already changed, reviewed the new required field for log verification, made sure it could not be skipped before sign-off. Around him, the new team was already working inside that adjustment, checking logs as part of routine now, not as exception. Olivia showed another nurse the exact sequence Emily had taught her. No instruction needed. The difference was no longer subtle. It was embedded. Emily was already near the exit when Reed called her name. Not loudly, just enough to reach her before she left. She turned. He did not give a speech. He only said, "The report confirms your timeline." Emily nodded once, because that was the only part that mattered. Not acknowledgement, not apology, accuracy. After a brief pause, Reed added, "We are updating protocol based on this." Again she nodded, because that was the correct outcome. Nothing else needed to be said. Emily turned back toward the hallway. Early morning light cut across the floor as she passed the glass wall of the ICU. Inside, the machines held steady without hidden adjustments. Readings consistent. System aligned. The staff continued their work with a slightly different rhythm now. One that included what had been missing before. Reed remained at the station, not watching Emily leave, but looking at the open audit trail on the console. A complete record. Not interpretation. Sequence. Then he made one final adjustment in the system. Any future calibration profile would now require an explicit shutdown confirmation before persisting. A small control, but it closed the exact gap that had nearly taken the unit down. As the ICU moved fully into day shift, nothing looked dramatic. No visible sign of how close the night had come to breaking in the wrong direction. Except for one thing. Every log was now checked before any assumption was made. And the record of that night remained in the system, precise and unchanged, showing exactly when the drift began, exactly who saw it first, and exactly how it was corrected before anyone else realized it was already happening.